his value add. And the whole time he was talking, it was extremely calm, and his tonality was right on point. And he kind of got through the whole pitch, and it went pretty well. But at the very end, when they only asked for one question from the audience, and somebody asked a question, they said, why are you the person that should be building this company? And he had a slide on there about his past performance with nonprofits, managing millions of dollars of equity in a nonprofit space, and having that experience. But this question, he was almost waiting for. You could tell, I don't think it was a plant. He was legitimately waiting for this question. And his response, and I guess I should give a little bit of background here. Transparent Collective, their entire mission is to back, I would say, underrepresented founders.
Yeah.
And they have a stat that they talked about at the beginning of the call, or beginning of the presentations, where as a minority founder coming out of YC, you have about 4% chance of getting funded. Coming out of Techstars, it's about 1%, but with Transparent Collective, it's around 64%. And so and that kind of plays into his answer here, where he was like, okay, well, why am I the best person to do this? And he talked about, he had this story where he had this company, he was raising money for it, he got all the way to the final round with a very well-known firm, and at the very last minute, he said that they shut the recorder off and told him, we're not going to invest in you because you don't look like us. And he was like, that moment is what put me on this journey of, the best version of revenge I can get is being the most successful company in this space and let them sit on the sidelines while I blow up. And that was like, it kind of, the entire room got a little bit quiet while he was talking about it. And then as he wrapped it up, you could just tell the energy kind of came back, and it was like, oh wow, like there's gravitas to what he's saying, because everybody in this room was impacted by that. And so it was super powerful.
Yeah, one word you used a lot was conviction. Especially when you were telling that story to me the first time.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, but I think it applies here. To have conviction, you need to be
So we are back recording.
What up? What up, though?
Another week.
You out the D, baby. What's up?
Founders Drive.
Yeah, man.
This is great.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty fun week.
Yeah, we just did our deployments for Saturday, like we do every week, and then obviously during the week as well. But
we have some good features that came out. Some upgrades to Muse. So we have some workflows that you can tap into. Muse is the AI assistant that we use to help the creators and the entrepreneurs on the platform get their ideas together, get them out there, and help people be productive. And then we had some
landing page updates.
Yes, some landing page updates. The landing page being the like the digital storefront to get you up and started and sell your digital products, bookings, one-on-one calls, webinars. We add the ability to do free products recently. So check it out if it's something that you need. We also had a pretty active week. Met a lot of people. We found our way into some VC entrepreneur
invite-only events.
Yeah, and one thing led to another, and we met a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I go to New Lab. New Lab is a technology innovation mobility hub in Detroit that opened up recently. And I go there to meet Pete Martin.
Shout out
Pete. Shout out Pete. He has, what's the name of his podcast again? It's like the flannel.
I think so, like investing in Michigan. I don't know what the name of it is though.
We'll link it.
Absolutely, down below.
He just recently named it too. But the he talks a lot about the activity and technology, specifically in the venture space, going on in Michigan, and we definitely recommend it. He gives a lot of information out, and it's one of those positive podcasts.
Yes.
A lot of people talk about a lot of the negative things going on, and that's a positive podcast. But anyway, Jake sent me a link saying, "Hey, this is a cool podcast." I reached out to him. I met him at New Lab
In person. Yeah.
And he ended up telling me about this event with
Venture Collective and Detroit. Was it Venture 313?
Venture 313.
Yeah.
And is it Transformative Collective?
Transparent Collective.
Transparent Collective.
Yep.
And we met a lot of founders. We met some investors, and we are mostly going to be talking about pitching in this episode, and things adjacent. Like that's kind of the launch pad that prompted us to want to talk about that.
Yeah, and then it also ties into the feature updates that we brought like to the platform this week around the landing page and being able to brand yourself. Because I think pitching is a sort of branding that you get to do, hopefully to a VC, but also to like any kind of room, right? Where you're pitching your idea, and that first impression is what a lot of people will run with, after you have multiple interactions with them.
Yeah. So if a brand is the story that people explain in multiple ways, the thing that's resonated with me the most is a brand is a story that's remembered. It's how you're remembered.
That's
and
true.
It's a story of how you're remembered. So a pitch plays into that. It's especially an initial pitch, a first pitch. It's anybody has to go off when they're saying, "This is how I remember the person." And it was kind of cool because, of course, in these networking situations, we get to go out there and pitch ourselves and what the actual event was together. Why, because we got invited after, but the actual event was to bring different entrepreneurs from around the country together in Detroit, to highlight some of the things that we have going on, but then also match different people. So we saw other founders pitching, other investors. You went to the actual event. I didn't get a chance to make it, but you went to the actual event where they were doing the pitches in an actual formal way. So maybe you can speak a little bit on that, and we can dance around.
It was interesting. Yeah, it was really interesting. I kind of snuck in. I wasn't pitching and I wasn't part of the VC round, but it was cool. I've been through a couple of demo days, especially like in college. They have like the business demo day where you have to, kind of pitch your idea. And this was very similar, where, I think they had 9 or 10 companies come up, founders. They had about 3.5 minutes each to kind of get through a slide deck that was prepared beforehand, and they just kind of let everybody know what they were trying to do. There was a really cool, interesting dynamic because the night before this pitch, we met up at the event with some of these founders, and so it was almost like my second time getting introduced to what they do and their product. And I could just tell that because I had some of the background knowledge, I was filling in gaps that they were missing out on their presentation, or I was learning stuff that they forgot to tell me in person in the presentation. And so just kind of the environment that we were in, I had a lot of learnings in terms of what I feel like makes a good pitch and what doesn't make a good pitch.
Well, and there's a couple dynamics at play. Yeah. One is, of course, it's very different pitching somebody than when you're talking about it casually with friends.
Of course.
And so anything that we say here is all about us learning, because we only can identify it because either we're making the same mistake, we've made the same mistake in the past, or we're probably going to make some version of it in the future. So It's how do you correct, learn from it, and get better.
Yeah.
And the second dynamic is there's the pitching in there's a conversational pitch, and then there's the formal pitch.
Right.
And I think highlighting the differences between those is important. Like one of the things that we saw is people were really, I didn't see the formal pitches, but people were really relaxed in a conversational environment.
Yeah.
Some people were drinking, some people were, just kicked back, and there wasn't the pressure of delivering a performance.
There's no stage, essentially.
And that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because we talked to a couple of the founders, and they were telling us that they were about to pitch the next day. We didn't even know that was a thing at that point. We were like, oh, so this is an actual program. There's an actual agenda, and there's an end game. So we found that out. But we were talking with some people, and we were kind of joking, like, hey, don't mess it up. And people were like, oh, I'm nervous, and it was so shocking because when we were talking with them, it was effortless. They were putting out their ideas, and it was like, you have no reason to be nervous because I'm hearing you. It sounds like you have great things going on. It sounds like you're killing it. It sounds like you already have product market fit. For the people that have been listening, how I don't like that term, but for the sake of conversation.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can speak to a little bit more of that difference, that contrast between the conversational pitches and then the formal pitches, both the good and the bad. Because there's some people that got better when the lights came on. There's some people that weren't as relaxed and effortless when they were doing the formal pitch.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to call some of these companies. You guys can go check them out. Specifically, I had two examples that kind of come to mind as you were kind of going through that. The first one was a conversation with the CEO of Brief. Brief is a company that tries to make documents smart, so you can always find the right document that you have to edit or send or retrieve. And talking to her at the, rooftop kind of mix and mingle event, before the presentations, she was very personable. She was extremely well spoken in terms of this is where we see people using it today. This is kind of the team that I have, and this is why, with my background, I'm the best person to do this. When she got up on stage the second day, she was screaming into the microphone.
Yelling at the mic.
Yeah, she was legitimately screaming into the microphone, and I think it was just partly nerves, but it lands differently. And I think it's important to have some volume in your voice when you're talking, especially to a room. But on a mic, it can come across as yelling if you're too loud, and the mic actually amplifies that.
That's actually something that I don't see as highlighted as much, but tonality. But I've had this happen before. I can remember a long time ago, I gave a speech. It was at school, and I wrote it out. It was for student government or something like that. I wrote it out, and I didn't really practice it. But when I went through it, I had my pace in mind, but when I got up there, I was running through my words. And people were telling me that after. They're like, yeah, we didn't really hear a couple of the things because you were just talking so fast.
Yeah.
And my time was way off. And so I think there's some things that happen that you don't even really think about when you're pitching, which is tonality shifts that can be unpredictable.
Yep.
You have voice, volume is another one.
Tonality,
speed is another one.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's something that kind of got in her way when she was pitching on the stage and not when she was talking conversation.
It sucks too because it sounded, especially when I was talking to her in person, it sounded like a great idea and a great company, and I was pulling for her, and that mindset of that's how I run my company, that's how I do business is a great example, but it sucks that the VC sees this weird kind of performance that you're putting on, which doesn't really correlate to how you run the business.
Yeah.
Obviously it would be great if everybody that runs a business is good at public speaking. We think that's important.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be, if Zuckerberg can't public speak, he can still run Facebook.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of a different dynamic too, because that might be the first time some of those VCs even, knew about our company. Yeah. And that's kind of the impression they got.
Yeah, and hopefully some of that stuff is offset by the week that they had to go through these workshops and mix and mingle with some of the different people. But to your point, it's a shame because one pitch, one performance can get in the way of people seeing the actual value that you have to offer.
Exactly.
And that's something that it kind of mandates having at least some level of competency to being able to communicate. Not speaking to any of the people that we saw yesterday, just speaking more broadly and looking at ourselves, is it mandates that you have to be able to communicate the value that you're offering and do it in a way where it's first and foremost you're relaxed and you're calm.
Yep.
And you're meeting the energy of the moment, I should say.
Exactly.
Calm isn't always a thing. Sometimes
if the room is rowdy, you get rowdy.
Yeah. Or in being able to bring that up, bring it down, and so
yes.
that's something. But you had also told me about somebody who wasn't as clear on the specifics, but when he was speaking, it took his level of conviction. Took the room to another level and brought his product to another level. Maybe you can speak on some of that.
Yeah, so this was the founder of LiteRaise, and we'll link some of these companies and products below. But LiteRaise, he was kind of going through the pitch. Extremely well-spoken guy. He had this idea that nonprofits need to have better access to funding, especially when we're seeing all of these nonprofits kind of get doged away. All the funding that these companies rely on, if they get cut unpredictably, some of these companies will just go belly up. And so making that a little bit more predictable, and then also being able to stay compliant in that space was kind of his value add. And the whole time he was talking, it was extremely calm, and his tonality was right on point. And he kind of got through the whole pitch, and it went pretty well. But at the very end, when they only asked for one question from the audience, and somebody asked a question, they said, why are you the person that should be building this company? And he had a slide on there about his past performance with nonprofits, managing millions of dollars of equity in a nonprofit space, and having that experience. But this question, he was almost waiting for. You could tell, I don't think it was a plant. He was legitimately waiting for this question. And his response, and I guess I should give a little bit of background here. Transparent Collective, their entire mission is to back, I would say,
minority
underrepresented founders.
Yeah.
And they have a stat that they talked about at the beginning of the call, or beginning of the presentations, where as a minority founder coming out of YC, you have about 4% chance of getting funded. Coming out of Techstars, it's about 1%, but with Transparent Collective, it's around 64%. And so and that kind of plays into his answer here, where he was like, okay, well, why am I the best person to do this? And he had this story where he had this company, he was raising money for it, he got all the way to the final round with a very well-known firm, and at the very last minute, he said that they shut the recorder off and told him, we're not going to invest in you because you don't look like us. And he was like, that moment is what put me on this journey of the best version of revenge I can get is being the most successful company in this space and let them sit on the sidelines while I blow up. And that was like, the entire room got a little bit quiet while he was talking about it. And then as he wrapped it up, you could just tell the energy kind of came back, and it was like, oh wow, like there's gravitas to what he's saying, because everybody in this room was impacted by that. And so it was super powerful.
Yeah, one word that you used a lot was conviction. Especially when you were telling that story to me the first time. And I've said this before, but I think it applies here. To have conviction, you need to be convinced of something. And when you have moments like that, it's not necessarily related to the product, it's related to the founder. And a lot of investors, at least from what I've heard and what I've seen on Shark Tank, but a lot of investors invest in the person. They might realize, hey, you might not get it right this time, but when you invest in a person, that person can try multiple times, and you've built a relationship. And so when they do hit, they remember that. And if you were, you had a strong enough relationship to invest in them at the right time, then that could pay a financial dividend. But that stories about experiences where people can read, are you for real? Like, are you really about this? Or are you just telling me the sweet nothings that just to get some money out of me? Can be a huge differentiator. And so that's what that sounds like to me, is this person had an experience, and that created a lot of conviction around, I'm going to see this through. I'm going to make sure that we find success. And it might not be the initial one way that I imagined it initially. But we'll create a path.
I think it's a mix, right? There are some founders, I know there's some VCs that'll look at the founder more so than the product, and some VCs will look at the product more so than the founder. It's certainly a mix, because I know that some VCs are super well connected. They're like, oh, we can get a team around you. Or it's like, you're a really good person, let me shift you to this new idea. So I think there's definitely a mix there, but you're right, like an experience like that where you can show your conviction goes a long way in terms of like a room with investors. And he had the mic.
Well, and conviction isn't just, it could be convinced of, this is where the market's going. It can be convinced of, I have a chip on my shoulder.
Could be a lot.
It can be convinced.
Yeah.
It's like, but what is the investor going to see in you that where they could read that conviction?
Yes.
And say, okay, my money's in good hands, because I think that's largely what
the trust almost.
That's largely what VCs are looking for. Is they're looking to trust is a good word, and they're looking to minimize their risk.
Right.
They want upside with lower risk, and so that creates an environment where a VC will be looking for those from people that create that type of feeling in them.
Yeah.
So you spoke about another one that I thought was interesting. That it was another one that you said he was a pretty charismatic guy, and he was talking about digital clones or something in that line.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Aphid was a company that was pitching in this round. Aphid's been featured on some of the most major news sources: Forbes, CNBC, Fox News, all these big, not Fox News, but Fox. And they are building a product to help you clone yourself. And in his speech, in his pitch, he kind of got the audience thinking about what the world would look like with his product in the world, right? And so he started his pitch with like, hey, we're here, we're gonna try and clone you. And yes, this is Black Mirror coming to life. He literally was like, yeah, I'm gonna play on the fact that people have seen Black Mirror, they have this dystopian kind of view of what's happening, and I'm bringing that to the world. I think that was a super good touch point in terms of putting cloning into a spot where people can understand like what he's talking about.
He changed the frame.
He changed the frame a little bit, I think, there. Everything after that was a lot of pontification around like, what could a clone do for you? How could you be productive if you had a clone? Because I don't think they had working software yet. That's why they were pitching to raise money for the development. And so it was a lot of that after of it was like, okay, what could the world look like if we brought this to market?
Ooh.
Yeah, and that was really exciting too, just in terms of also some of the nuggets that I feel like we could use in terms of cloning yourself in the digital space.
Yeah. Before I forget,
yeah,
I'm gonna plug Super Secret, but let's talk a little bit about how you can speak from conviction and vision, and how to get better at vision when we talk about Super Secret. So if you're listening to this right now, we're going to be talking a little bit more on this recording right now, but tap into the Super Secret Drive
on Constance,
where we go through and we talk a little bit more about some of the things that we're learning, and we get a little bit more in depth, give a little bit more game, talk a little bit more real about some of the things that we've learned and along the way, and some of the mess ups that we've had, all that stuff. But it's just a little bit more personal, intimate talk where I think we can get a little bit more in the weeds. But yeah, so he was speaking about these digital clones, and he sold the vision.
Yes.
He sold the after, what you'll see after you go to market and invest in this person. So that's interesting. Was there anything else that stood out?
In terms of the whole event, or just him?
Him, and then we can go zoom out into the whole event.
With him, I think it was just cool how he, like you said, framed it. I think that was a big part of what I took away from him. His pitch, not just him. In terms of, like you were saying, painting that vision for somebody that they can kind of hop on the train with you and say, okay, yeah, I can see this world where your product is being used by hundreds of millions of people and the benefits that would come.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Anything else stand out in terms of other pitches?
There was one more pitch that kind of stuck with me because I spent so much time talking to this founder the day before, and this was the CEO of Storkii.
Okay.
Storkii is a childcare solution for families and for childcare centers, because on any random day, a childcare is going to have a long wait list of people trying to get in. But also on any random day, they might have 2 or 3 kids call off, for sickness, for family vacations, for literally anything, right? And so you have these daycares that are not always at 100% capacity, and there's money left on the table, and so their solution is trying to help that ecosystem. And her pitch, especially when I was talking to her, in person, the pitch that she gave me in person was all about how she's the perfect person to do this, how she has all this success in the childcare industry. I think she had made more than $10 million running her own childcare facilities.
She killed it.
Stuff that was a league above and beyond everybody else in the room.
She led with product market fit, and that's the weirdest thing is she was making a tech pitch, but she had a lot of business experience in the field, and so that's something I didn't hear her pitch. I didn't hear her pitch on the stage. But I ran into her a couple of times, and I heard her give her pitch multiple times. She talked to me about it. She talked to you about it, and I was like, "This is a no-brainer. You seem like somebody that knows what you're doing. It's very proactive. That's doing all of the right things, and has had success without the technology."
Right.
And so the technology is because she's experienced the problem over and over again, and she's been successful despite that problem, but now she wants to do something about that problem because it makes business sense, but it's also like
a pain point for her.
And so
I think it was and so like when she got to her pitch on the stage, it wasn't even a stage, it was just like an open dance floor, and she just kind of walked out onto it. It didn't bring the same amount of weight that I felt that it did when I was in person with her. It was a little bit more professional and polished, where I think that her benefit was being personable.
She had a great energy,
extremely good energy, extremely like bubbly, and just like ready to talk to you about why this pain point needs to be solved and why she's the perfect person for it. Again, that's a really common theme. But then when she got on stage and had this slide deck behind her, you could almost tell that somebody had given her the advice to like, oh, lead with this, oh, go here and talk about the financials, talk about your team a little bit more. And it wasn't until 3/4, maybe halfway through the presentation, where she finally got to her accomplishments. You know, it was about halfway through on her team slide where she was like, oh yeah, and by the way, I made $10 million in this space. Which, you know, is leagues above and beyond everybody else in that room.
Was there any story there? Was there any of the storytelling in her formal pitch? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because money and success is a great motivator in terms of trust. I can trust that, right? There's a check part. But I think conviction comes when you're not logically trying to explain, or can be felt. You feel it emotionally. And so was there any of that, or was it more explaining the logic around the business?
You're right. It was way more heavily indexed with the logic behind the business and not so much the story. And I told her this before she went on. I was like, tell the story. Tell your story.
Be real. Be you. Be authentic and tell the truth. That's a broad. Those are broad statements. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how do you get to, like, how do you even explain that? Like, how to deliver that? And maybe it is just practicing and going through it a few times. But it's that, to me, is like, I want to hear about stories of kids not being able to get into daycare or childcare for the day, and what that actual experience is like.
Exactly.
And knowing that you're somebody who's experienced enough to make that problem go away for single parents out there, or you know, people that are caught up in a jam. Like that stuff matters, and that's something where there's people that have gone through that exact same experience.
Well, she's gone through that exact same experience.
But I mean, in the audience, like,
and there's parents in the audience.
Exactly. Where it's like, okay, let's connect on that level first. Let's make sure that we see each other as people first, and then it's like you have to create that lane. And this is something that's really become apparent to me in the last few months. But you have to create that lane for people to be able to hear you. I think in the pit, it's different in pitches. Like, again, when you're just conversational and relaxed, it's easy. It happens effortless. Like everybody can do it. I don't think it's a skill of that's an intelligence skill. It's more of a feel thing,
a comfort thing. I think if you're talking to your friends or your family about this stuff,
it's obvious.
You are way more comfortable or relaxed. Things just kind of happen, and as soon as you get on a stage or in an audience, it's like, oh, I forgot what I'm talking about.
Or like, I want this thing so bad. I don't want to mess it up, and then that can get in the way of being your relaxed self. One thing that I really did, I was considering saving this too, but is just practice. I mean, I don't think people talk about the level of practice, and this isn't a reflection of these people, right? But the level of practice that's needed to make things natural.
Just in general,
Just in general. I think I've said this before, but I had a friend when I was in college. He's a lawyer now, a great lawyer. And he was helping me with one of my speeches that I was giving. Again, student government, but this is now the college space. And he was like, do you have your speech? And I was like, yeah, I have some notes written down. He was like, let's run through it. And so I went through it, and he was like, pretty good. Run through it again. And I was like, I just like never heard anybody external to me do that in a speech, in a speaking setting. I've had that in sports where somebody will say, okay, do another rep, and you go through, and it's all about reps and drilling. But you don't really hear that as much in the speaking space. At least I had it.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think in the pitching, that's something where it could go a long way. Specifically with the goal in mind of getting to a place where you're relaxed.
Yeah.
I'll throw one more example out there. Anthony Hopkins, the actor. He's known for reading through the script at least 200 times. He's like, I don't feel comfortable.
Wow.
I think it was 250 times. And you'll hear Matthew McConaughey. He says, I study my speech in every single context. I'll do it when I am after I get back from the gym, on a late night when I'm winding down with some wine. I'll do it
in different headspaces.
In different headspaces, so it becomes a part of you, and it's natural, and it just kind of flows out. And then when you go up there, you're not thinking about trying to make a good impression. You're just saying, hey, I'm just going up there and I'm speaking. But a lot of that stuff is upfront work, and I don't think that's stressed enough.
It's definitely not stressed enough. I think a lot of people see that in the actor space, and they go, "Oh, well, they're playing a character.
Yeah,
they have to do that. They're getting into whoever they're playing." And I think people have to realize that when you're on a stage or when you're pitching anybody, meeting somebody for the first time, you're now a character in their life.
Yeah,
you now show up as a character in their everyday life, and if you continue to show up in their life, or in their view, then they're going to have a specific view of what your character is.
You can be a very memorable character,
yes,
or you can be an NPC.
Exactly.
Do you want to be an NPC? do you want to be an NPC?
Oh geez, I mean, there's so many people that just go through life and they don't have that metacognition. But
I think the thing is metacognition. I guess it's in the name, right? They're talking about meta, right? But I think even that's context dependent.
Correct.
Because within a context, you can have a meta view of a whole bunch of different siloed parts in that same space. But when you add in one thing that's unfamiliar, suddenly it becomes more difficult. Or if you shift the context, then, the things that you had a great bird's eye view over in this other context is just not as clear in this new context. And I think by nature we almost retreat into being fear-based as opposed to curious and having like a positive outlook on outcomes, and but it is what it is.
I think the only thing I would add to that is that when you're thinking of yourself as like a character in somebody else's story or even somebody else's life, there's a way to be yourself like a fake character and like play the part.
Yeah.
But what you said earlier, I think, is extremely important, and that is like, if you're gonna do this, tell the truth. Whatever you're doing, the easiest thing is to just tell the truth. The stuff that you're doing every single day to make your business the best it can be is what people want to hear, because that's what the truth is.
Yes.
As soon as you start going away from that, you get into these really murky waters where you have to start, worrying about how you're being perceived and stuff like that. But if you just kind of have that baseline of like, I'm going to tell the truth and I'm going to have a strong conviction on that, it goes a long way in terms of building character.
And we're going to talk about that in this super secret. But
That's
before
right.
we do that, I want to also say one more thing about the whole acting thing.
Yeah.
Because when you're a character, seeing that can be really helpful as a metaphor, but I think it's also a very literal thing in the sense that actors are professionals at mimicking actions. Acting is actions.
That's
and
cool.
when you're not good at your actions, we can tell that you're faking and we can tell that you're pretending, and that makes you not a good actor.
Yep.
Because the motions and the actions that you're making, speaking involved,
don't line up.
If they don't line up and they're not congruent, we can feel that.
Yeah.
And so it's like a very simple example is when people are like, yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, I'm so into that. It's an extreme example, and it's not, applicable to every single situation, but you can see how that extrapolates in other areas where if you're not congruent, then that speaks. And so part of finding yourself is finding like the areas that you feel most comfortable and congruent with, so you can act in a way that meets the moment. You even hear people where like that person doesn't know how to act when they're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Right.
It's not beneficial to them or other people. So acting is actions. There are professional people, but that skill still applies to other areas. There are professional speakers, but you should also know how to speak in your real life.
Exactly.
There are professional writers. You should also know how to write in your real life. There are professional athletes, but even Nike has this campaign. If you're able-bodied, not even just able-bodied, if you have a body, you're an athlete. I think that's their whole campaign.
Yeah.
And so there are professionals, but people that use their body in other means to stay healthy, it's like those are people that are also, like, that's a skill. And so with acting, it's a generalized skill that I think we can benefit from by taking it serious. What actions am I doing? When you think about Steve Jobs, he practiced those presentations so much.
Yeah.
Everything down to the T, even more modern, in a more modern capacity. Alex Hormozy, he talks about how many times he went through his presentations around the books that he released. And so that stuff goes such a long way. And I think people conflate acting, pretending, and being disingenuous, but when you have control over your actions, specifically in a situation that matters to you, then you can actually be authentic, because you're not going to be doing things that are not what you meant to be doing.
Yes, and that's just telling the truth.
Yeah, that's telling the truth. And we're going to we'll kick off the other one with telling the truth, because I think there's some ways, some frames that we can look at telling the truth that really make it easier, because telling the truth, something that, it's advice that I got, and I still think it's some of the best advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah.
But it's something I had to sit on to turn it into something that I could actualize and make actionable. And so we'll kick off the Super Secret Founders Drive. With that information, we'll also get into some of the vision stuff that I wanted to talk about. And
Absolutely.
then anything that you also want.
Oh yeah, and if you guys are interested in what I have to say about that topic, tune into the Super Secret podcast on Constance.
Yes.
And we'll see you next week.
Cool. And subscribe for more information. Peace out.